She saved a SEAL in 5 minutes. The single dad said one thing. Then the FBI stepped in. Dana did not plan to save anyone that morning. She was running on 4 hours of sleep, a half-eaten granola bar from the night before, and the particular kind of exhaustion that does not go away with rest. It lives in the bones. 12-hour shifts at the hospital had a way of doing that to a person. She had just finished one and was supposed to be driving home, but her body had made a small detour on its own. The gas station on Cumberland Avenue was not the closest one. It was not the nicest one, but it had a coffee machine that did not taste like regret. And on mornings like this one, that was enough reason. Fayetteville, North Carolina was already awake. It was always awake. A military town does not sleep the way other towns do. It runs on a different clock. Trucks moved through the parking lot. A man in uniform pumped gas and talked on the phone. A woman in a running suit jogged past the entrance without looking up. The fluorescent lights inside buzzed at a frequency just high enough to be unpleasant, and Dana walked past them without noticing anymore. She got her coffee. Black, no sugar. She had given up sugar in her coffee 2 years ago for a reason she no longer remembered, and now she simply did not add it out of habit. She was almost to her car when she saw the truck. It was a dark blue pickup, parked at the far end of the lot, away from the pumps. The engine was running. She knew it was running because she could see the exhaust rising in the cold morning air, thin and steady, like breath. The truck had been there when she pulled in. She had noticed it then, and filed it away somewhere without thinking about it. Now, walking back, she noticed it again. The man inside was not sleeping. He was not on his phone. He was not eating or drinking or doing any of the ordinary things people did when they sat in parked cars. He was sitting completely still, both hands resting on his thighs, looking at the dashboard. Dana stopped walking. She stood there for a moment with her coffee in her hand and looked at the truck. Most people would not have stopped. Most people would have assumed he was waiting for someone or just taking a moment before starting his day. Most people did not spend 12 years working in a hospital where stillness like that meant something specific. She had learned to read it the hard way. His name was Marcus Holt. She did not know that yet. She did not know anything about him except what she could see through a windshield from 15 feet away, which was a man in his early 40s, wearing a plain gray hoodie, sitting still in a running truck at 6:43 in the morning, with the kind of empty expression that is not peace. It is the look of someone who has already had a very long conversation with themselves and has arrived somewhere they did not want to arrive. She walked over. She knocked on the passenger window, lightly, the way you knock on a door when you are not sure you want it answered. He turned and looked at her. His eyes were focused. He was not gone. He was still very much present. That was important. That meant there was still a door open. He rolled down the window. She said, "I am not selling anything. I promise. I just wanted to check on you." He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "I'm fine." People who are fine do not say it like that. Dana leaned against the truck, not close enough to crowd him, just close enough to make it clear she was not leaving. She had done this before. Not with cameras on her, not with anyone watching, just quietly, and without ceremony, in parking lots and waiting rooms, and once in the stairwell of the hospital, on a night when a family member of a patient had needed someone to simply stand near them. She said, "You look like someone who has been strong for too long." She did not plan to say that. It came out of some part of her that was not running on logic or training. It was just true. Marcus Holt looked at her. Something in his face moved. He had been a Navy SEAL for 16 years. He had served in places whose names the public did not know, and done things for which there were no civilian translations. He had come home with both legs, both arms, most of his hearing, and a collection of interior damage that had no visible edges. He had raised 2 daughters alone after his wife left 4 years ago. Not because she was a bad person, because she was a human person who had run out of ways to reach someone who had stopped letting her try. He had 2 girls, Nora, who was 10 and had recently decided she wanted to be a marine biologist, and Brianna, who was 7, and still spelled most words wrong and drew pictures of everything she loved. That morning, Brianna had left her backpack in the passenger seat of his truck, the bluey one, with the broken zipper he kept meaning to fix. He had driven her to school, walked her in, come back to the truck, and sat down. And then he had not gotten back up. He was not sure exactly how long he had been sitting there. 20 minutes, maybe. Maybe more. He had been thinking about Nora's science project, which was due on Thursday. He had been thinking about the grocery list on the refrigerator. He had been thinking about whether Brianna's teacher had noticed that she had been quieter than usual this week. He had been thinking about all of the ordinary things he still had to do, and somewhere underneath all of those thoughts, like something very heavy pressing up through the floor, he had been thinking about how tired he was of being the only person who kept the lights on. He was not thinking about doing anything. He had not decided anything. He was just sitting with the weight of it, and the weight was very heavy that morning. And then a woman knocked on his window. He did not tell Dana any of this. He told her almost nothing, but she did not need him to. She had been reading people through glass and curtains and bad lighting for over a decade. She pulled out her phone and called the VA crisis line while they were still talking, quietly, not making it dramatic, just placing the call the way you hand someone a glass of water. Here, take this. She stayed for 5 minutes. She made sure he was on the phone with someone. She made sure he agreed to drive somewhere before he drove anywhere else. The VA clinic was 11 minutes away. She knew because she had looked it up while they talked. She did not hug him. She did not give him her number. She did not make it a moment. She put her hand briefly on the doorframe of the truck, said, "You have people counting on you, and that matters. But you also matter on your own." And then she picked up her coffee, which had gone cold, and she walked to her car. She drove home. She did not tell anyone. She showered, slept for 6 hours, woke up, ate toast, and went back to her shift. She charted 4 patients. She drank more bad coffee. She checked in on a 19-year-old who was scared about a diagnosis, and an older man named George who had no family coming to visit, and who needed someone to just sit with him for a while. She did not think about the truck very much. She did not know his name. She did not know his daughter's names. She did not know about the backpack or the broken zipper, or the science project due on Thursday. She did not know, and she did not need to know. Marcus drove to the VA clinic. He sat in a room with a counselor named Philip, who had tired eyes and good handwriting, and who did not try to fix everything in 1 hour. He just listened. Marcus talked more than he expected to. He did not mention the woman at the gas station for a long time. When he did, he described her in 3 sentences. He went home. He picked up Brianna's backpack from the truck. He drove to the store, bought the things on the grocery list, came home, and made dinner. Pasta, because it was easy, and both girls liked it. Nora asked him how his day was. He said, "Better than it started." She nodded and went back to her science project. Brianna drew a picture at the table while they waited for the water to boil. She drew a woman in scrubs and a truck, and something that was meant to be a coffee cup. Under the drawing she wrote, in purple crayon, the word friend. She spelled it wrong. Marcus did not correct her. He put the drawing on the refrigerator, next to the grocery list, and stood there looking at it for a moment before he turned back to the stove. He fixed the zipper on the backpack that night, after the girls were asleep. It was a small thing. It was enough. 3 weeks passed. Fayetteville moved the way it always moved, at the pace of a town that has seen enough to not be shocked by much. Parents stood in school pickup lines. Drive-thrus stayed busy at dinner time. The VA clinic on Ramsey Street opened at 8 and saw more people than it had appointments for. Marcus Holt stood in the pickup line at Brianna's school on a Tuesday afternoon, hands in his jacket pockets, watching the doors. He looked different from the man in the truck. Not dramatically, not in any way you could point to and name, but people who knew him, who had known him before, would have noticed. His shoulders sat differently. His eyes tracked the doors with something that was not dread. A woman named Carol stepped up beside him. She was the mother of one of Nora's classmates, a loud and warm woman who coached the soccer team and knew everyone's business without being cruel about it. Her husband, Pete, had served, was still serving, and she had been in enough VA waiting rooms to recognize what a person looked like on both sides of something hard. She had seen Marcus there, at the clinic, 3 weeks ago. She had not said anything then. It was not the kind of place where you said things. But standing in a school pickup line on a Tuesday afternoon was a different kind of place, and Carol was not the kind of person who let things go unacknowledged forever. She said, "Pete saw you at the clinic a few weeks back. He said you were looking better when you came out than when you went in. Marcus looked at her. Carol was not asking for information. She was not prying. She was doing the only thing she knew how to do, which was acknowledge that something had happened and that it had mattered. Marcus said, "A stranger decided I was worth 5 minutes of her time." He said it quietly, without drama, the way a person says something that has been sitting in them long enough to become simple. Carol looked at him. He did not say anything else. The school doors opened and children began coming out, and the line moved, and Brianna came running across the pavement with her bluey backpack bouncing on her shoulders, zipper fixed, and she grabbed Marcus's hand and said something about a frog she had seen at recess, and Marcus listened to every word. Carol stood there for a moment after they walked away. That night, she told Pete what Marcus had said. Pete told her it was one of the most honest things he had heard in a long time. Carol typed it out on her phone. 7 words. A stranger decided I was worth 5 minutes of her time. She posted it in a Facebook group called Military Families of Fayetteville, with a short note about how sometimes the smallest acts from strangers are the ones that hold people together. She did not use Marcus's name. She did not give details. She just posted the sentence and a brief explanation of the situation, as much as she knew, which was not very much. She closed the app and went to bed. By morning, the post had 240 comments. By the afternoon of the following day, it had been shared over 11,000 times. By the end of that week, the number was past 180,000. It is hard to explain why certain things travel the way they do on the internet. It is not always the most dramatic stories. Sometimes it is the quiet ones, the ones that do not have a conclusion yet, the ones that feel unfinished in a way that mirrors something in the person reading them. This story felt like that. A man in a truck, a stranger with coffee, 5 minutes, 2 daughters, a broken zipper that got fixed. People responded to it the way they respond to something that reminds them of their own close calls, the ones they survived, the ones they were not sure they would, the ones where someone showed up or did not show up, or showed up just barely in time. Veterans posted about their own moments in parking lots. Nurses and paramedics and grocery store workers wrote about the people they had stopped for and never seen again. Parents wrote about their children. Children wrote about their parents. People wrote about strangers on bridges and strangers on subway platforms and strangers who had asked, at the right moment, if they were okay. The sentence traveled. Marcus did not know about any of it for 4 days. He did not spend much time on social media. He had an account he used mainly to follow Nora's soccer league updates and occasionally to look at woodworking videos. He was not the kind of man who scrolled. He woke up early and made breakfast and took the girls to school and went to his appointments and came home and made dinner and helped with homework and fixed the things that needed fixing and went to sleep. It was Philip, his counselor at the VA, who told him. He mentioned it carefully, the way Philip did most things, not to create alarm, but to make sure Marcus heard it from someone he trusted before he heard it somewhere else. Marcus sat with it for a moment. He asked Philip if the woman had been identified. Philip said he did not know. Marcus went home and did not search for her name, because he realized he did not know her name. He had never asked. She had never offered. He knew what she looked like, more or less, through a truck window in early morning light. He knew the color of her scrubs. He knew the sound of her voice, which was steady without being flat. He knew what she had said, which he had not forgotten, and did not expect to forget. He did not search for her. He called Philip the next morning and asked what the right thing to do was. Philip said the right thing was whatever helped Marcus stay on the path he was on. Marcus thought about that for a day. Then he called Carol. He was not angry. He understood that Carol had not used his name and had not meant any harm. He told her that. Then he asked her, gently but directly, to take the post down. She did. Immediately. Without argument. She called him back 20 minutes later and apologized, and he told her she had nothing to apologize for, and he meant it. The post was gone. The shares were not. That is the thing about the internet. You can delete the source. You cannot call back the water. Screenshots had been taken. The sentence had been copied and pasted into other posts, other groups, other platforms. News aggregators had picked it up. A military veterans support organization with 400,000 followers had shared it. A podcast about mental health had read it aloud on air without attribution. A woman in Minnesota had put it on a chalkboard sign outside her coffee shop and taken a photograph, and that photograph had been shared another 60,000 times. The sentence was no longer in anyone's control. And somewhere in all of that movement, a name had appeared. Not Marcus's name, not Carol's name, a different name entirely. A name that had been attached to the story by someone who either misunderstood what they had read or had decided, for reasons no one could yet explain, to insert themselves into it. The name was a woman's, a nurse, in Fayetteville. And for a few days, before anyone checked anything, the internet decided that this woman was the stranger with the coffee. She was not. But by the time anyone sorted that out, something much more complicated had already started. Marcus became aware of the wrong name the same way he became aware of most things in this season of his life, carefully, through a second-hand source. Nora came home from school one afternoon and said that her teacher had mentioned something about a story online and asked Nora if her dad was the one in it. Nora was 10 and had the particular intelligence of a child who notices when adults are being careful around her, so she came straight home and asked Marcus directly. He sat at the kitchen table and told her the truth, in the version that was appropriate for 10 years old. A woman had been kind to him. The story had gotten out. He did not know how. He was working on making sure no one got hurt by any of it. Nora listened. Then she said, "Is the woman okay?" Marcus told her he was working on finding that out. Nora went back to her homework. Brianna drew another picture. This one had more people in it than the last one. The purple crayon was running low. 2 days later, the name being circulated online turned out to belong to a real nurse who worked at a real hospital in Fayetteville. Her name was Beverly Carter. She was 38. She had nothing to do with the gas station, the truck, or the 5 minutes. She had never met Marcus Holt. She had been at work that morning, as she was most mornings, doing her job, not saving anyone in any story that was about to go viral. Beverly found out she was being called a hero on the internet, the same way most people find out surprising things about themselves. A colleague showed her a phone. Beverly looked at it. She looked at it for a long time. Then she said, very calmly, that she had no idea what any of it was about. Her colleagues believed her immediately. The internet was slower to accept this. Some people doubled down. They had shared the story with her name attached. They had told their followers about her. One television segment had mentioned her name on air, briefly, without confirmation. Retracting that kind of thing required effort that not everyone was willing to put in. Beverly was kind about it. Publicly. She posted once, a short and clear statement that she was not the person in the story, that she hoped the real person was well, and that she supported anyone who was working in mental health advocacy. She kept the post factual. She did not express frustration, at least not in public. In private, she was exhausted by it. Her inbox had 400 messages. Her hospital administrator had called her. Journalists had found her phone number. She was getting credit for something she had not done, which sounds like it should feel good, and did not. The real Dana saw Beverly's post on a Thursday morning, during a break, sitting in the same supply closet where she had eaten her granola bar weeks earlier. She read it twice. She put her phone face down on her knee and sat there for a moment. She thought about Beverly Carter, who was sitting somewhere in the same city, getting calls from journalists, dealing with a story that was not hers. She thought about the right thing to do. Dana was not a complicated person in the ways that mattered most. She was private. She valued her privacy the way some people value clean water, as a basic condition for living well. She had not come forward because there was nothing to come forward about. She had not saved anyone in a dramatic sense. She had stopped. She had knocked on a window. She had made a phone call. She had held a door open for 5 minutes until someone steadier than her could take over. That was not a story, in her mind. That was a Tuesday. But Beverly Carter was living inside a story she had not written, and that was a different thing entirely. Dana told exactly one person, her supervisor, a practical and deeply private woman named Ruth, who had worked at the hospital for 23 years and had the particular gift of being impossible to shock. Dana told her what had happened, why the story was circulating, and what she was considering doing. Ruth listened without interrupting. Then she said, "What do you want to happen?" Dana said she wanted Beverly Carter's name to come off a story that did not belong to her. Ruth said, "Then figure out the smallest way to make that happen." Dana nodded. She finished her coffee. She went back to her patients. She thought about it for the rest of the shift. By the time she got to her car that evening, she had figured out the smallest way. She did not call a journalist. She did not post on social media. She drove to the VA clinic on Ramsey Street, and she left a message at the front desk for a counselor named Philip, who she had never met, asking him to pass along a note to a patient whose first name was Marcus, and who had been in a blue pickup truck at the Cumberland Avenue gas station 6 weeks ago. The note said, "I heard the wrong name is going around. I am the right person. Tell him I am fine and do not want any attention. But if Beverly Carter needs confirmation, I will confirm." She signed it only with her first name. She drove home. She did not know, yet, that the story had grown too large for quiet corrections. She did not know, yet, that a man in Ohio was already telling people he was the one in the truck. And she did not know, yet, that before the week was out, 2 federal agents would be asking her employer for her personnel records. The man in Ohio was named Gary. He was 44 years old, lived alone in a rented house outside of Columbus, worked a warehouse job that paid enough to cover the basics and not much else. He was not a bad person in the way that movies cast bad people. He was something more ordinary than that, and in some ways harder to explain. He was a person who had spent a long time feeling like he existed at the edge of other people's stories, close enough to see them but never quite inside them. He had no military background. He had no connection to Fayetteville. He had read the post that Carol had shared, and then the screenshots of it after Carol took the post down, and then the articles that followed, and something had happened to him that he could not fully articulate even to himself. He wanted to be the person someone had stopped for. He wanted to be worth 5 minutes. He did not plan it carefully. It started as a comment on one of the shared posts, something vague, "I think I know what this guy went through," which got responses, which prompted him to add more detail, which prompted more responses, which created a thread in which Gary, without ever explicitly saying it was him, had allowed 30 or 40 strangers to conclude that it was. Then someone asked him directly, and he said yes. He did not think it would go further than a comment section. Most things stay in comment sections. But one of the people in that thread was a woman who ran a small podcast about mental health and veteran support. She reached out to Gary privately. She was warm and genuine, and believed what he was telling her entirely, because why would someone lie about something like this? She asked if he would be willing to share his story. He said yes. The episode aired on a Wednesday. By Friday, 3 news outlets had picked up the claim. Gary had given 2 phone interviews. He had not been asked to verify anything. In a news cycle moving at the speed that this one was, verification had fallen a few steps behind momentum. The Veterans Support Organization that had originally shared the post saw the podcast episode and flagged it. Something about Gary's account did not match the details in the original post. The geography was wrong. Small things, but specific ones. They reached out to the podcast. The podcast reached out to Gary. Gary, by this point, was in deep enough that getting out cleanly required admitting things that felt unsurvivable. He told the podcast host that he may have conflated some details. He did not say he had lied. The podcast host, to her credit, immediately suspended the episode and began making calls. One of those calls went to a veterans advocacy group with enough connections to reach people at the VA in Fayetteville. Those people had already received Dana's note. Philip, Marcus's counselor, had received the note and had quietly confirmed to the clinic's administrative director that the original event had taken place as described, at the location described, involving a patient who was real and a nurse who was real. The advocacy group had, by this point, also been contacted by a journalist doing a fact-checking piece. The journalist had found Beverly Carter. Beverly had given a clear and documented account of where she had been that morning. There was now a confirmed original event, a confirmed false claimant, and a GoFundMe. The GoFundMe is where the federal involvement began. Someone, identity unknown, had created a fundraiser in the name of the woman who saved the seal. It had collected over $42,000 in 6 days. It had been set up in the name of a nurse in Fayetteville, which had become associated with Beverly Carter's name before the misidentification had been corrected. Beverly had not authorized it. She had not known about it for nearly 3 days. The moment she found out, she contacted the platform. The platform froze the funds. But the GoFundMe also created a financial element, and financial elements with fraud-adjacent circumstances, especially ones involving the name of a person who had not authorized the use of that name, are the kind of thing that crosses desks in federal offices. The FBI field office in Charlotte opened a review. It was not a dramatic investigation. There were no raids, no flashing lights, no moments that looked like a television drama. It was paperwork, and phone calls, and a formal process of confirming who had done what, and whether any of it rose to the level of criminal action. Dana was contacted because her name had been located through the VA note, which had passed through enough hands to reach the right ones. 2 agents came to her hospital. They were professional and quiet, and sat in a room with her for 40 minutes. She had never been in a room with federal agents before. She found it less frightening than she expected, mostly because they were clearly not interested in her as a subject of suspicion. They needed her statement to help build the timeline. She gave 4 sentences. She was present at the location. She interacted briefly with an individual in a vehicle. She encouraged the individual to seek support. She left the scene and did not publicize the event. The agents asked if she had any documentation. She said she did not. They asked if she would be willing to be contacted again if necessary. She said yes. They thanked her and left. Dana sat in the room for a moment after they were gone. Then she went back to her patients. Marcus found out about the FBI review the same day. Philip told him directly, in their session, because Philip believed in telling people things clearly, rather than letting them find out through a third party. Marcus sat very still when Philip told him. He had a specific kind of stillness that was different from the kind in the truck. This was the stillness of a man processing information and deciding what to do with it. He decided within about 90 seconds. He drove to the FBI field office in Charlotte the next morning. He had not called ahead. He was not sure that calling ahead was the right approach. He dressed the way he dressed for school pickup, jeans, a clean jacket, the grass stain on his left knee from helping Brianna practice her soccer kick the evening before. He had the bluey keychain on his lanyard because he had not switched it out. He walked in and told the person at the front desk that he was the individual at the center of the matter, currently under review, and that he would like to speak to whoever was handling it. They made him wait for 22 minutes. He was fine with waiting. When the agent came out, Marcus said 2 things. He said that the woman who had stopped for him had done nothing wrong, and he wanted that documented clearly. And then he put the drawing on the desk. Brianna's drawing. The one from weeks ago with the woman in scrubs and the truck and the coffee cup and the word friend in purple crayon. He had laminated it. The agent looked at it for a moment. Marcus said, "My 7-year-old made that the same week it happened. She did not know what happened. I just told her that a nice person had talked to her dad when he needed it. That is what she drew." He did not ask for anything. He did not make demands. He left the drawing and walked back out to his truck. He drove home and made lunch and picked up Brianna from school and let her tell him everything about her day, and did not mention any of it. The FBI investigation closed 11 days later. Gary, in Ohio, was not charged criminally. The review concluded that while his behavior had been deceptive and had contributed to the circumstances surrounding the unauthorized GoFundMe, proving criminal intent at a level required for prosecution was not achievable. The GoFundMe platform worked with the relevant authorities to return the funds. A formal determination was issued that no criminal charges would be pursued, but that the individuals behind the unauthorized fundraiser were being referred to the platform for permanent account action. Gary gave a short public statement, drafted with the help of a legal advisor, acknowledging that he had allowed a false impression to develop and that he was sorry for the confusion it had caused. He did not use the word lie. Beverly Carter received a formal written apology from 3 news outlets and the podcast. She accepted them all without public comment. She went back to her job. She changed her phone number. The story wound down the way most viral stories do, not with resolution but with distraction. Something else happened somewhere else, and attention moved toward it. And the parking lot and the truck and the 5 minutes receded into the part of the internet where things live after people stop looking at them. Dana did not know the case had closed for 4 days. She found out from Ruth, who had seen a brief item in a local paper. Ruth told her during a shift change in the hallway. Dana said, Good. And went in to check on her first patient of the morning. The GoFundMe money was returned to donors. Brianna's drawing stayed on the wall of the FBI field office in Charlotte for a while. Nobody took it down. Nobody could remember who had authorized it to be put up. It was just there, next to the door, in a clear laminate sleeve. Friend, in purple. 7 months after the gas station. Philip made the introduction carefully, the way he did most things, through a brief and practical email to both parties. No pressure, no expectation, just the information that the other person existed and was open to meeting if they wanted to. He had asked Marcus first. Marcus had said yes right away, which was itself something. Philip had then located Dana through the VA administrative contact, who had held onto her information the way institutions sometimes quietly hold onto the things that matter. Dana read the email. She was between patients. She sat on the bench outside the supply closet, which had become her unofficial thinking spot, and she read it twice. She said yes. They agreed on a time, a Tuesday morning, a coffee shop near the hospital that Dana knew and Marcus had never been to. Neutral ground. No press. No Philip. Just two people who had spent 7 months living in the same story from opposite sides of it. Dana was 12 minutes late. She was late because she had stopped at a gas station on the way. Not the Cumberland Avenue one, a different one. There was a woman sitting in a sedan near the far edge of the lot, engine running, completely still. Dana had pulled in to buy a bottle of water, seen her, and sat with herself for a moment the way she always did, running the quick internal check that she had never formally named and did not think of as a system. It was just looking at something and deciding whether to look away. She did not look away. She knocked on the window. The woman inside was having a bad morning, a very ordinary bad morning, the kind that sits on a person's chest and makes a parking lot feel like a place to hide. She was not in danger. She just needed someone to see her. Dana sat with her for 4 minutes and told her that the day could change from here. Not that it would, that it could. The woman nodded. Her eyes were wet. She said thank you in a voice that meant something more than the words. Dana bought her water and got back in the car and drove to the coffee shop, which was now 12 minutes away, in the wrong direction. Marcus was already there. He had a table near the window and 2 coffees, and the exact expression of a man who had expected her to be late and was not bothered by it. He stood when she came in. They shook hands. She sat down and said, "I'm sorry. There was a parking lot." He understood immediately. They did not spend the first part of the conversation talking about what had happened. They talked about other things first, the way people do when they have been assigned to each other by circumstance and are still figuring out the ordinary shape of each other. He told her about Nora's science project, which had placed second in the school competition. She told him about a patient named George, who had finally agreed to let his son come visit. He told her about the woodworking project he had started in the garage, a small bench he was making for the backyard. She told him about her brother Darius. Not much. 1 sentence, placed quietly in the conversation, the way you set something fragile on a table. She said she had a brother she lost a long time ago, and that she had been paying attention to parking lots ever since. Marcus did not ask for more. He received the sentence the way it was offered, and did not press on it. He had enough experience with things that did not get elaborated on to know when to leave them alone. They sat with it for a moment. Then he asked her what she had said to herself in those 2 seconds before she knocked on his window. She thought about that. She picked up her coffee. She said it was not a thought exactly. It was more like a habit of the body. She had stopped because some part of her had registered something before her conscious mind had caught up. She said she was not sure that was heroism. She said it might just be pattern recognition in scrubs. Marcus smiled. It was a slow smile, the kind that takes a moment to arrive. But when it did, it changed the shape of his whole face. He said, "I do not care what you call it." She asked about the girls. He took out his phone and showed her 2 photographs. Nora at her science project, holding the second-place ribbon with the expression of someone who intended to win next year. Brianna at the kitchen table, with a drawing spread in front of her, tongue slightly out in concentration. Dana looked at the photographs. She did not say anything for a moment. She asked what Brianna liked to draw. He said, "Everything she loves." The coffee shop was quiet around them. Morning light came through the window at a low angle and sat on the table between them. Other people typed on laptops. A barista called out an order. A dog was tied to a post outside and watched the door hopefully. Marcus wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. He said, "Can I ask you something?" She said yes. He said, "That morning. What made you stop? I mean really stop. Not the training. Not the habit. What was it specifically?" She looked at him. She set down her coffee. She said, "Your hands. They were doing nothing. Hands like yours are never doing nothing." He looked down at his hands. He turned them over once, slowly. The way you look at something you have been carrying for so long you stop noticing the weight of it. He did not say anything for a while. Outside, the parking lot was ordinary. Cars came and went. A man dropped his keys and picked them up. A mother lifted a toddler out of a back seat. Ordinary morning. Ordinary movement. People going somewhere. Coming from somewhere. Living at the middle distance of each other's lives. Dana was already scanning it. Not out loud. Not dramatically. Just with her eyes moving across it the way they always did. Checking the stillness. Reading the temperatures. Doing the quiet and unremarkable work of a person who had decided, a long time ago, that 5 minutes was a price she was always willing to pay. Marcus watched her for a moment. He thought about the bench he was building in the garage. He had not decided yet what wood to use. He was thinking oak. It needed to be something that held up. He thought about Nora's science project and the second-place ribbon, and the way she had already started planning for next year with the particular focused determination that she had gotten from him and he had gotten from somewhere he could not name. He thought about Brianna's drawings, the ones that filled the refrigerator, the ones that covered the table, the ones that documented everything she loved in crayon, and misspelling, and absolute confidence. He thought about a parking lot on a cold morning, and a woman who knocked on his window and said 7 words that had rearranged something inside him that he had not known was rearrangeable. He drank his coffee. She drank hers. The morning went on around them, unremarkable and continuous, full of people who did not know each other and never would, and a few who did not know each other yet and still might, and all the small and uncelebrated decisions that hold the whole thing together. Dana finished her cup. She set it down and looked at him. She said she had to get back for her shift in 40 minutes. He said that was fine. She said she was glad Philip had sent the email. He said he was too. They stood. They put on their coats. He held the door and she walked through it, and they stood on the sidewalk for a moment in the ordinary morning air. He said, "Take care of yourself, not just the parking lots." She laughed. It was a short, real laugh, the kind that surprises the person doing it. She said, "I'm working on it." She walked to her car. He walked to his truck. The bluey keychain caught the morning light for a second as he unlocked the door. He got in, started the engine, put his hands on the wheel. They were doing something now. He pulled out of the parking lot and drove home toward his daughters and his bench and the backpack with the fixed zipper and everything ordinary and necessary that made a life. And he did not look back. He did not need to.